Former President Donald Trump will very loudly plead not guilty. When asked by host Dana Bash if Trump would be taking a mugshot, Tacopina replied, this is his lawyer, I believe, this is not normal operating procedure. It's all up in the air. All the Tuesday stuff is still very much up in the air, other than the fact that we will loudly and proudly say not guilty. Trump has said he will travel to New York on Monday and surrender on Tuesday. This is directly from Truth Social from Donald Trump. I will be leaving Mar-a-Lago on Monday, 12 noon, heading to Trump Tower in New York. On Tuesday morning, I will be going to, believe it or not, the courthouse. America was not supposed to be this way. The indictment stems from Trump allegedly falsifying business records concerning a 130,000 payment to Daniels in 2016 over an alleged sexual encounter that the two had in 2006. Trump has denied sexual contact with the porn star and that the payments violated the law. CNN has reported that there are 34 counts in the indictment, including a felony, though the records remain sealed. Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty to charges over the payment in 2018 and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. In July 2019, federal prosecutors determined that no additional people would be charged alongside Cohen. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg took the unusual step of reviving the case to bring charges against the former president, which many Republican politicians and commentators have deemed a political persecution. According to a report from Newsweek, Trump is not expected to perp walk or handcuffed during the surrender. It is also expected that Trump will be held in custody and will be released on his own recognizance after he is formally charged on Tuesday, the report said. It's a lot to respond there, but we'll go to you first, Josh, for your initial reaction to the article.
Yeah, I think this is follow the Republic stuff. This is crossing the Rubicon. Whatever kind of horrible historical analogies you want to use, you'd have to use them for other countries because this never happened in America. When we get to the point where we're as a country, well, Democrats are as a country willing to arrest, even go through the process of arresting the opposition leader and leading candidate, the likely, I mean, let's be honest, the likely candidate of the opposition party. It's Banana Republic stuff. It's should never be done. It should never be done. Even if he wasn't a candidate, it shouldn't be done. Even if these weren't bogus charges, even if these were real charges, it shouldn't be done. Generally speaking, heads of state, you should just leave it alone. I mean, the level of crime, the level of serious crime that you have to reach in order to go down that road is so high. There's a reason we've never done it in U.S. history. And you could think of, all the different crimes that presidents have done that have been involved in. There's a reason why the Constitution gives them the power to unilaterally pardon anyone, including themselves. And there's a reason for that, because otherwise you have judicial tyranny and you can use the court system to create a one-party state. And I think that's where we're headed towards. So it's very dangerous times for the country.
Yeah. Nathaniel, did you have any initial reaction to the article?
Yeah, I don't keep up very closely with the minute details of these things. I kind of like to see how they play out. I'm always reminded of Proverbs 18:17. The one who first states his case seems right until another comes along and cross-examines him. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in reserving, especially emotional responses to these types of things, regardless of who they are. I would agree with Joshua just in that it's unusual. I think where I would probably take a very different stand, and maybe even argue this is part of the overall problem, is when we start making comments about heads of state kind of being left alone, even if it's legitimate charges and things like that. I think as Christians, we can never want to just turn a blind eye to wrong that is done. Now, I don't know if he's done wrong in those areas. I haven't read up about it. Don't know what the charges are, but I just imagine if it were someone on the other political side, we would be quite happy to see them charged if it was just. And so, no, I think as believers, we want to see justice. If he's guilty, he's guilty. And I think that's the Christian response, is the righteous response. Now, if he's not guilty, he's not guilty. Now, I think all of that being said, we obviously know that, one party is just absolutely godless in their ideology. And so they're going about things in ways that are unjust. Anyway, that's kind of my initial thoughts. We should want to see righteousness and justice served, all the time with anyone. If you look at the other side of just thinking of the stuff with Hunter Biden's laptop and stuff, all of us would like to see that come to light, and whatever justice be served there. And you know what? If Trump's guilty of things that he needs to answer for, then so be it. I think as Christians, we should want to see a country that loves true justice more than we love our favorite political candidate. That would be kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah.
I think some of the stuff that either of you guys are saying resonates true, because on one hand, the justice that is readily available in our legal system will always be biased to some effect. It's biased in one direction or another. In this case, you could say all the nonsense to Stormy Daniels is like, okay, well, didn't we get through that when he was about to be elected the first time around? And here we are once again. So to Joshua's point, like, it's kind of irrelevant. It should not be blown into this proportion. However, also, yeah, he should be held accountable for his actions. And if that means paying a fine or a bail or whatever, it's not as if he should be that concerned about that aspect of things. What is fascinating to me in all this, aside from the justice, because our state cannot provide absolute righteousness in justice, and they won't one way or another. Either Trump will be smeared legally by proper legal grounds on the bias against him, or he can kind of shove off the legal ramifications of his actions because of the legal bias towards him, which he's had on his side for many, many years prior to becoming a political candidate. What's interesting to me in this story is the kind of the logical implications. The implications being, like Trump is even saying in this article, that it's a political smear campaign that's meant to affect his eligibility in the next election. So he will leverage that for his viewer base as a way that the election is once again undermined. And what's fascinating is the opposition to Trump is really showing us their cards by saying they believe Trump has such a good chance of being elected on his own merit that they need to act against that. And they're really stoking the flames of, if that is in fact the case and a majority of the nation would rather have Donald Trump than any Democratic candidate, then these actions will only stoke that fire. So it seems kind of logically flawed just from a strategic viewpoint on a political aspect, unless they can truly prevent his eligibility for candidacy, which it doesn't seem like that's the case.
Well, if they can convict him of being a felon, then there are certain states where he'd be kept off the ballot unless they change the laws. So and then if they could also put a gag order on him, then that can prevent him from campaigning and even mentioning this issue. So it creates a situation where the courts and the media can, like we have leaks of the documents, of the charging documents, and that's it's a grand jury. That's illegal. That's not supposed to happen, and yet it's happening. So they get to leak whatever they want, and then it gets put in the media. So he gets smeared in the media, but then a gag order, which, I mean, we're being told now that that's the plan of the judge, is to put a gag order on him. Then he can't defend himself in the public eye. I mean, that basically ensures a that he's not going to be able to get a fair trial, especially in a in a city where, you know, the DA was elected running on, I'm going to find something to charge him on, you know.
Yeah.
So but I got a question, because I don't want us to confuse, to Nathaniel's point, Christian righteousness and, you know, absolute righteousness versus the law and the U.S., you know, the way the U.S. Constitution is set up, which I think it was set up in a way that was very wise. But like, for example, do you think that, and I'll just pose this question to everyone, do you think that presidents should not have the power to pardon?
It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a
Does that oppose, you know, Christian righteousness and justice? You know,
I think one thing that I could say, at least from the standpoint of what our representative republic is supposed to do, at least, is the checks and balances are supposed to make it to where actually getting to the point where you are in the White House should be a very rigorous process. And so there should, in theory, I say should because there's been a lot of, you know, checks and balances that have been eroded over the course of the last 100 years or so of our republic, where we are getting closer to being a democracy than we are a republic. But there's still many things of the small R republic that are still intact. And I think that being said, the president is supposed to be a more accurate depiction of the will of the people. And so to some degree, the president can, you know, take what should be the overall consensus of the people and apply that to the standard of pardoning someone if there was a injustice done. You know, two people that are always kind of the poster children for, you know, whether or not someone should be pardoned is Edward Snowden and oh my word, my mind's going blank. Snowden and Assange. And, you know, many people have wanted those two to be pardoned for a long, long time, and they have not received their pardon. Is that a matter of biblical justice? I mean, I'll turn that back over to Michael and Nathaniel to say, but I guess I just wanted to quickly clarify that I think it, you know, the president is given that power, and in a perfect world where our republic is working as it functions, that is a power that's kind of reserved for the person that's supposed to best symbolize the direction the country is going in.
I want to hear Nathaniel's thoughts.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure if you were trying to link this to the previous comment. I'm not sure how they would link, but I think, you know, you're talking about ethics. We would understand ethics to be rooted in biblical ethics, and so I would say that it would depend on what's being pardoned. You can most certainly cross a line that would mean it's unrighteous in God's eyes, regardless of what power they do or don't have. Let me give you a practical example. I don't really care what the law currently says about abortion. It's absolutely evil, and yet the law of the land is that it's not considered murder. Right. So that would be just a very clear instance of where what's allowable legally crosses the line of what's disallowed by God. And so, yeah, you know, I think there could be pardons where it doesn't cross that line, and then I think there could be pardons where it does cross that line. I don't think we could just take a flat kind of view on that. Specifics would sort of matter. I think that would be my take. But what I wasn't trying to say is, or rather minimize, is the deviousness behind what's happening with, you know, Trump's indictment. I think you're absolutely right, and I would agree wholeheartedly that it's devious, and the purpose isn't justice anyway, though in God's sovereignty that may happen. But that's not their purpose. You know, obviously the Democrat Party is looking to twist and distort things to their benefit because there's an election coming up, right? And so I don't think anyone with 2 cents or any common sense, although it's not as common these days, could look at this whole thing and think that, one, the Democrat Party cares about justice at all, or two, that there's not something, evil intended behind it. I mean, they've just demonstrated that's what the platform is and does.